The bloodied telegram crackled in Hannah Prescott's trembling hands as she stood on the porch of the sprawling ranch house her father had built with his own 2 hands. Dust devils swirled across the drought-stricken pasture, mirroring the turmoil in her heart as she read the words again. Regret to inform you Samuel Prescott killed in stage robbery. Stop. Body returning tomorrow. Stop. The year was 1878, and at 22, Hannah had just become the sole owner of the Crescent P, the largest cattle ranch in Taylor, Texas. The wind whipped her chestnut hair across her face as she stared out at the vast expanse of land stretching toward the horizon. 5,000 acres, 300 head of cattle, and a dozen men who'd never take orders from a woman. Her father had always said the Prescott name meant something in Taylor County. Now she'd find out exactly what. Miss Hannah. Martha, the housekeeper who'd helped raise her after her mother's death 15 years ago, stepped onto the porch. The men are gathered in the bunkhouse. They're asking what happens now. Hannah straightened her spine, tucking the telegram into her pocket. Tell them I'll be right there. Martha's weathered face creased with worry. Child, they ain't gonna take kindly to. I know exactly what they'll take kindly to, Hannah interrupted, her voice steadier than she felt. But this is my ranch now, and they'll either work for me or find employment elsewhere. The bunkhouse fell silent when Hannah pushed through the door. 12 men, their faces shadowed in the lantern light, stared back at her with expressions ranging from pity to outright hostility. Gentlemen, she began, her voice filling the small space. My father's funeral will be held tomorrow. The day after, work continues as usual. I'll be taking over management of the Crescent P. A derisive laugh erupted from the back of the room. Bill Harkins, her father's trail boss for the past 5 years, stepped forward. With all due respect, Miss Prescott, running a cattle ranch ain't women's work. You ought to sell to someone who knows the business. Hannah met his gaze unflinchingly. My father taught me this business since I was tall enough to reach a stirrup. I've ridden every acre of this ranch, helped with every roundup since I was 12. Book learning and riding alongside your pa ain't the same as running the place, another voice called out. Then I suggest you find another ranch to work for, Hannah replied coolly. Those who stay will be paid the same wages my father offered. Those who don't, collect what you're owed in the morning. As she turned to leave, Harkins called after her. No man in this county will work under a woman's orders, Miss Prescott. You'd best face facts. Hannah paused at the door. Then I'll find men who will. By morning, 7 of the 12 hands had packed their belongings and ridden out. Hannah stood on the porch, watching them go with a mixture of fury and desperation. The spring cattle drive was 6 weeks away. Without hands to work the herd, the Crescent P would be finished before she'd even begun. Hannah's father was laid to rest on a windswept hill overlooking the ranch, beside the grave of her mother. As the preacher spoke of eternal peace, Hannah felt anything but peaceful. The banker, Mr. Phillips, had already paid her a visit, unsubtly suggesting she might want to consider offers from neighboring ranchers. 3 proposals of marriage had arrived by messenger before her father's body was even cold. All from men who'd never given her a second glance before she inherited 5,000 acres of prime Texas grazing land. The remaining ranch hands worked with visible reluctance, following her instructions with barely concealed disdain. Hannah knew they were simply biding their time, waiting for her to fail. And without enough men, failure seemed inevitable. A week after the funeral, Hannah rode out to the north pasture where the men were mending fences. She'd spent the morning in her father's study, poring over the ledgers. The numbers were worse than she'd feared. The Crescent P needed the income from the upcoming cattle drive to survive. As she approached, she noticed a stranger working alongside her men. Tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by a worn Stetson, he hammered fence posts with an efficiency the others lacked. His buckskin horse grazed nearby, a fine animal that spoke of an owner who knew good horseflesh. When he straightened and turned toward her, Hannah felt an unexpected jolt. The stranger couldn't have been much older than 30, with a face weathered by sun and wind, intelligent blue eyes, and a strong jaw darkened with stubble. Unlike her men who avoided her gaze, he looked directly at her, tipping his hat with a slight nod. "Madam," he greeted, his voice a low drawl that somehow cut through the sound of hammering. "I don't recall hiring you, mister," Hannah said, reining in her mare. "You didn't." He drove another nail into the post with a single, powerful stroke. "Name's Patrick Forrester. I heard you might be looking for hands." "And where did you hear that?" she asked, her tone wary. A hint of a smile crossed his face. "News travels, especially news about a woman running the biggest spread in the county." Hannah studied him, noting the well-worn but carefully maintained gear, the calloused hands that spoke of years of honest labor. "Where were you working before?" "Circle him up near Fort Worth. Before that, drove cattle up from San Antonio to Kansas. Been working ranches since I was 16. One of her regular hands, Tom Wilson, approached with visible unease. "He rode in this morning, Miss Prescott. Said he was looking for work. We were short-handed, so." He trailed off with a shrug. "You've got experience with cattle drives?" Hannah asked Forrester. 8 drives up the Kishome Trail," he confirmed. "Worked my way from drover to point rider." Hannah made a quick calculation. With the spring drive approaching, she couldn't afford to turn away experienced help, especially when half the county seemed determined to see her fail. "I pay $15 a month plus room and board," she said. "Trail drive pays extra. Work starts at sunrise, ends when the job's done. Sunday mornings off for those who want church." Patrick Forrester nodded. "Fair enough." "One more thing, Mr. Forrester," Hannah added, looking him squarely in the eye. "This is my ranch. I give the orders. If you have a problem taking direction from a woman, best ride on now." For a long moment he studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he smiled a genuine smile that transformed his face and reached his eyes. "Miss Prescott, I've worked for all kinds of bosses. The only thing that matters to me is whether they know what they're doing." He gestured to the precisely aligned fence post he'd just set. "Do you?" Hannah felt something in her chest loosen slightly, a tentative hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel since receiving that telegram. "Yes, Mr. Forrester, I do." "Then we'll get along just fine." As Hannah rode back to the ranch house, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. Whether Patrick Forrester would prove to be the ally she desperately needed, or just another man waiting for her to fail, remained to be seen. But for the first time in days, she felt like she might have a fighting chance. The next morning, Hannah rose before dawn. She dressed in practical riding clothes, split skirt, cotton blouse, and boots, and headed to the stables. The spring roundup would begin in 2 days, and every animal on Crescent P land needed to be gathered, counted, and prepared for the drive. With only 6 regular hands and the new arrival, Forrester, they were dangerously undermanned. She found Patrick already in the corral, breaking a spirited young gelding her father had purchased just before his death. He moved with the horse in a fluid dance, gentle yet firm, communicating through subtle shifts in pressure and weight. The gelding, which had bucked off 2 previous riders, was responding with grudging respect. "You have a way with horses," Hannah commented as she approached the fence. Patrick glanced over, not losing his focus on the animal. "They're honest creatures. Show them respect, they'll return it." He guided the gelding to a stop near her. "Unlike some men." Speaking from experience, Mr. Forrester, a shadow crossed his face. Let's just say I understand what it's like when people decide what you're worth before knowing who you are. Before she could ask what he meant, Bill Harkins rode into the yard, accompanied by 3 unfamiliar men. Hannah felt her shoulders tense. Harkins had been one of the first to leave after her father's death, making it clear he considered her incapable of running the ranch. "Miss Prescott," Harkins called, dismounting with deliberate slowness. "Thought I'd stop by, see how you're managing." "We're managing just fine," Hannah replied evenly. Harkins smirked, glancing around the yard. "That's so. Word is you're running with half a crew. Spring roundup's coming. Cattle drive after that. Mighty ambitious for a woman alone." "She's not alone," Patrick said quietly, dismounting and standing beside Hannah. Harkins assessed the newcomer with narrowed eyes. "Don't believe we've met. Patrick Forrester." "Forrester." Recognition flickered in Harkins' eyes. "Heard of you. Didn't think you'd stoop to working for a woman." "I work for ranches that are run right," Patrick replied. "Sex of the owner doesn't concern me," Harkins laughed. "Well, she won't be owner long. Half the ranchers in the county are betting on when she'll give up and sell. My money's on before the cattle drive." Hannah stepped forward. "Is there a purpose to this visit, Mr. Harkins, or did you just come to share your wager?" "Actually, I'm here on behalf of Mr. James Blackburn. He's prepared to make you a generous offer for the Crescent P. Save you the embarrassment of a public failure." Blackburn. The name sent a chill through Hannah. The richest rancher in 3 counties with a reputation for ruthlessness that even her father had respected. He'd been trying to buy the Crescent P for years. "The ranch isn't for sale," Hannah said firmly. "Not to Mr. Blackburn or anyone else." Harkins' expression hardened. "Don't be foolish, girl. You can't handle this place. Your pa knew it. Everyone knows it." "I believe the lady gave you her answer," Patrick interrupted, his voice carrying a steel edge beneath its calm exterior. Harkins turned to him with a sneer. "You planning to take on Blackburn, Forrester, because that's what you're doing if you back this stubborn woman." Patrick didn't flinch. "I'm backing the owner of the Crescent P. If Mr. Blackburn has business here, he can come himself instead of sending errand boys." For a tense moment, Hannah thought Harkins might throw a punch. Instead, he spat on the ground, remounted his horse, and signaled to his companions. "Blackburn won't take kindly to being refused," he warned. "And he won't take kindly to you, Forrester, interfering in his business. You've made an enemy today." "Wouldn't be the first time," Patrick replied evenly. After they'd ridden away, Hannah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You didn't have to do that." Patrick turned to her, his expression serious. "Miss Prescott, men like Blackburn only understand one thing: strength. Show weakness, they'll destroy you." "I'm not weak," she said sharply. "I never said you were." His voice softened. "But you are outnumbered. And from what I've seen and heard, Blackburn plays dirty when he wants something." Hannah couldn't argue with that assessment. James Blackburn had acquired most of his considerable holdings through tactics that ranged from aggressive to questionable. Rumor had it that at least 2 of his neighboring ranchers had sold out after mysterious accidents decimated their herds. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Forrester?" "You barely know me." Patrick hesitated, then said simply, "Let's just say I recognize unfair odds when I see them." Before she could press further, Tom Wilson rode up with urgent news. A section of fence along the creek had been cut overnight, and 30 head of cattle had wandered onto Blackburn's land. "It's already started," Patrick murmured. Hannah straightened her shoulders. "Then we'd better get those cattle back before Mr. Blackburn decides they belong to him." The confrontation at the property line was exactly what Hannah had feared. Blackburn's men had already rounded up the strays and refused to return them, claiming they'd crossed naturally through a broken fence. Hannah, with Patrick and 2 other hands beside her, faced down 6 armed men. "Those cattle bear the Crescent P brand," Hannah insisted, her voice carrying across the disputed ground. "You know they're mine." The foreman of Blackburn's crew, a hard-faced man named Tucker, shook his head. "They're on Blackburn land. Way I see it, they're payment for the grass they've been eating." "Your fence was cut," Patrick said. "That's rustling, not accidental crossing." Tucker's hand drifted toward his gun. "You calling me a rustler, stranger?" The tension thickened. Hannah saw Patrick's body shift almost imperceptibly, readying for trouble. Her other men looked decidedly uncomfortable. "I'm saying someone cut that fence deliberately," Patrick replied calmly. "And it seems mighty convenient that you were ready to round up those cattle so quickly." Tucker's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're new around here. Might want to learn some respect before you make accusations." Hannah intervened before things escalated further. "I'll speak to Mr. Blackburn directly. Those are my cattle, legally branded, and I expect them returned." "Mr. Blackburn doesn't take orders from women," Tucker sneered. "Then he can explain to the sheriff why he's holding stolen property," Patrick countered. A tense silence followed before Tucker finally spat on the ground. "Take your damned cattle, but tell your new hand to watch his back." Accidents happen out here. As they herded the recovered cattle back toward Crescent P land, Hannah rode beside Patrick. "That was dangerous," she said quietly. "Blackburn's men have killed for less." Patrick's expression was grim. "The dangerous part is just beginning. Blackburn's testing you, seeing how far he can push. This won't be the last attempt." "Why is this happening?" Hannah's frustration burst forth. "My father ran this ranch for 20 years without this kind of trouble." "Your father was a man," Patrick said simply, "and he had a reputation. Men respected him, feared him maybe. And I'm just a woman." Patrick glanced at her. "A woman with 5,000 acres of prime grazing land and water rights that Blackburn has coveted for years. Your father wouldn't sell. Now Blackburn sees his chance." Hannah absorbed this in silence. Finally, she asked, "Do you think we should post guards on the property lines?" Patrick nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what we should do, and mend that fence today. Double strand the wire." For the first time, Hannah felt a spark of genuine confidence. In Patrick Forrester, she'd found not just a skilled ranch hand, but someone who seemed to truly understand the challenges she faced. "Thank you," she said quietly. His response was typically understated. "Just doing the job you hired me for, Miss Prescott." Over the next 2 weeks, Hannah's respect for Patrick grew steadily. He worked harder than any 2 men, rising before dawn and often continuing long after others had retired to the bunkhouse. More importantly, the other hands began to take their cues from him. The open resentment she'd faced began to give way to grudging respect, at least from some. One evening, Hannah found Patrick in the barn, mending tack by lantern light. The roundup was complete, with more cattle bearing the Crescent P brand than she'd dared hope for. The drive to Abilene would begin in 3 days. "Mr. Forrester," she called softly. He looked up, his face softened in the golden light. "Miss Prescott, you're up late." "So are you." She approached, taking a seat on a hay bale near him. "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done these past weeks." Patrick set aside the bridle he'd been repairing. "Just doing what needs doing. It's more than that." Hannah hesitated, then continued. "The men listen to you, they follow your example. Without you, I'm not sure we'd be ready for this drive." A slight smile crossed his face. "They're coming around on their own. You've earned their respect, working alongside them, knowing the business like you do. Your father taught you well." The mention of her father brought a familiar ache. "He always said a Prescott never asked someone to do something they wouldn't do themselves." Sounds like a wise man. He was. Hannah studied Patrick in the dim light. "You never talk about your past, Mr. Forrester. Where you're from, your family." Patrick was silent for a long moment. "Not much to tell. Grew up on a small farm in Missouri. Parents died of fever when I was 16. Been working ranches ever since." Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story, but Hannah didn't press. Everyone had their private sorrows. "Will you lead the drive to Abilene?" she asked instead. Patrick looked surprised. "That's trail boss work. Usually goes to someone who's been with the outfit longer." "There is no one who's been with the outfit longer," Hannah pointed out wryly. "Most of my father's men left when I took over. The few who stayed aren't qualified." "And you trust me with that responsibility?" "I do." The certainty in her voice surprised even her. Patrick studied her, his expression unreadable in the shadowed light. "What about you? Most owners don't go on the drive." "My father did. Every year." Hannah straightened. "I'll be going." Now Patrick looked genuinely startled. "Miss Prescott, a cattle drive is no place for a woman," Hannah finished, her voice cooling. "I've ridden every mile of that trail with my father twice before. I know the river crossings, the watering holes, the danger spots." "It's not about capability," Patrick argued. "It's about propriety. A woman alone with a dozen men for weeks on the trail." "I won't be alone," Hannah interrupted. "Martha will accompany me, and I'll have my own tent." She met his gaze directly. "This drive will determine whether the Crescent P survives or fails. I won't entrust that to anyone else, no matter how capable." Patrick looked like he wanted to argue further, but after a moment he simply nodded. "Then I'll make sure you have a good horse under you and the safest position in the herd." Hannah smiled. "I was thinking Point Rider, actually." To her surprise, Patrick laughed, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his face. "Your father really did teach you everything, didn't he?" "Everything he knew," Hannah confirmed, feeling a rare lightness in her chest. "Then Abilene won't know what hit it when Hannah Prescott rides in." The cattle drive began at dawn 3 days later, with nearly 300 head of Crescent P cattle moving north toward Abilene. Hannah rode alongside Patrick at the head of the herd, dressed in practical riding clothes that scandalized Martha but were necessary for the long journey ahead. The first day passed without incident, the cattle settling into the rhythm of the trail with surprising ease. Patrick organized the men efficiently, assigning positions based on experience and skill. Hannah noted with approval how he gave clear instructions without being overbearing, earning immediate respect from even the most skeptical hands. As they made camp the first evening, Hannah overheard one of the newer hands talking to Tom Wilson. "Never thought I'd be taking orders from a woman," the young cowboy said, glancing toward where Hannah was helping Martha set up their tent a modest distance from the main camp. "Miss Prescott knows her business," Tom replied. "Her father made sure of that. Still, ain't natural if Forrester weren't backing her." "Forrester ain't backing her," Tom corrected. "He's working for her same as us, and if you've got sense, you'll remember that." Hannah felt a complex mix of emotions at this exchange. Pride that Tom had defended her, frustration at the continued assumptions about her capabilities, and a nagging worry that perhaps her authority did indeed rest on Patrick's tacit endorsement. That night, after checking on the night guards, Hannah found herself unable to sleep. She slipped out of her tent and walked to the edge of camp where Patrick sat by a small fire, studying a map by its light. "Trouble sleeping?" he asked without looking up. "Just restless." Hannah sat on a log across from him. "First night on the trail always is." Patrick nodded. "Your father felt the same. Every drive." She smiled at the memory. "He'd pace all night checking the herd, worrying about every detail." "You're doing well," Patrick said quietly. "The men see it." "Even the doubters." Hannah met his gaze across the fire. "Because of you, they respect you." They're beginning to respect you, he corrected. And they should. You know this business as well as any man I've worked for. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. In the flickering light, Patrick's features seemed softer, more approachable than his usual reserved demeanor allowed. "Why did you really come to the Crescent P, Mr. Forrester?" Hannah asked suddenly. "There are plenty of ranches that would hire an experienced hand like you." Ranches without a woman owner fighting to prove herself. Patrick was quiet for so long that Hannah thought he might not answer. Finally, he set aside the map. "I heard about Samuel Prescott's death in a saloon in Fort Worth," he began. Men were talking, making bets on how long his daughter would last before selling out. Some were already planning to offer for the land, others for your hand. His jaw tightened. "The way they talked about you, like you were just another piece of property to be claimed, it didn't sit right with me." Hannah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "So you came out of what? Chivalry?" Patrick shook his head. "I came because I know what it's like to have everything you've worked for threatened by people who think they're entitled to take it." Something dark flickered in his eyes. "And because I believe in fighting for what's right, even when the odds are against you." "There's more to your story than you've told me," Hannah observed. "There's more to everyone's story," he replied. Then, with a deliberate change of subject, "We should reach the Colorado River crossing in 3 days if the weather holds. It's running high this year, according to reports." Hannah recognized the deflection but didn't push. Whatever Patrick Forrester was hiding, she sensed it wasn't something he was ready to share. Yet the knowledge that he had chosen to help her, to stand beside her against the prejudices and threats she faced, created a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire between them. "Good night, Mr. Forrester," she said softly, rising from her seat. "Good night, Miss Prescott," he replied, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Sleep well." The journey to the Colorado River proved more challenging than anticipated. A sudden spring storm turned the trail to mud, slowing their progress and making the cattle restless. By the time they reached the river on the 4th day, the water was running dangerously high, swollen with rain from upstream. Patrick rode along the banks, searching for a safe crossing point, while Hannah kept the herd together with the help of the other hands. When he returned, his expression was grim. "It's too high for a safe crossing," he reported. "We'll need to wait it out or find another ford." "Waiting means losing days," Hannah said. "And the next ford is 15 miles downstream." Patrick nodded. "It's your call, Miss Prescott." Hannah studied the churning river, remembering her father's lessons about water crossings. "We'll head downstream." Better to lose a day than lose cattle or men. As they redirected the herd, Hannah noticed one of Blackburn's riders watching from a distant ridge. It wasn't the first time they'd spotted his men following the drive, but it was the closest they'd come. "They're tracking us," she murmured to Patrick as they rode side by side. "Notice that too," he replied quietly. "Question is why? Watching to see if we fail or planning to make sure we do," the answer came that night. They'd made camp 2 miles from the downstream ford, planning to cross at first light when the water might be slightly lower. Hannah was awakened shortly after midnight by urgent voices and the sound of running men. She hurried from her tent to find Patrick organizing the hands into groups, his voice calm but commanding. "What's happening?" she demanded. "Someone spooked the herd," he explained tersely. "They're scattering south and east. We need to round them up before they disperse completely." Hannah didn't hesitate. "I'll take the south quadrant with Tom and Riley." Patrick looked like he might object, then nodded sharply. "Be careful. Whoever started this stampede might still be out there." For hours, they rode in the darkness, gathering scattered cattle and driving them back toward camp. The work was dangerous. Frightened cattle could easily trample a horse and rider, and the rough terrain was treacherous in the dark. By dawn, they'd recovered most of the herd, but the cost was clear. 2 horses with broken legs had to be put down. One hand suffered a broken arm, and they'd lost nearly a full day's travel. As Hannah dismounted from her exhausted horse, Patrick approached, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "You all right?" he asked, his eyes quickly assessing her for injury. "I'm fine." Hannah pushed back strands of hair that had escaped her braid. "Did you find what spooked them?" Patrick held out his hand, revealing several metal caltrops, spiked metal devices designed to lame horses. "Found these scattered around the perimeter, and tracks of at least 3 riders." Hannah's expression hardened. "Blackburn can't prove it," Patrick warned, "but it fits his pattern." "This isn't just business anymore," Hannah said, anger building in her voice. "This is sabotage. Men could have been killed." "That may be the point." Patrick's tone was grim. "Blackburn wants the Crescent P. If the drive fails, you might have no choice but to sell, and if you were to be injured or worse." He didn't need to finish the thought. Without her, the ranch would likely be sold to settle her father's remaining debts, and James Blackburn would be first in line to buy. "We continue," Hannah declared, loud enough for the nearby hands to hear. "We cross the river today and make up the lost time. Blackburn won't stop this drive." The men looked at her with new respect. They'd seen her work through the night alongside them, fearlessly riding into the darkness to recover scattered cattle. Whatever doubts they'd harbored about a woman's ability to lead were beginning to fade. Patrick nodded. "You heard Miss Prescott. We cross at noon. Double-check your gear and get some food. It's going to be a long day." As the men dispersed, Patrick's hand lightly touched Hannah's arm. "You should rest a bit. You've been in the saddle all night." The concern in his voice sent an unexpected warmth through her exhausted body. "So have you. I'm used to it." "So am I," Hannah replied, though she couldn't keep the fatigue from her voice. Patrick's eyes softened. "An hour's rest won't change anything. I'll wake you when we're ready to move." Too tired to argue, Hannah nodded. As she turned toward her tent, she heard Patrick issuing orders for guards to be posted around the camp. The gesture touched her not because she needed protection, but because he understood without being told that Blackburn's men might still be watching, waiting for another opportunity to sabotage the drive. For the first time since her father's death, Hannah felt truly supported, not as a woman in need of rescue, but as a rancher facing the same challenges any owner might face. The distinction meant more to her than she could express. The river crossing went better than expected. Patrick's expertise showed as he directed the operation, sending the strongest swimmers across first to guide the lead steers. The herd followed with minimal confusion, and though the current was strong, they lost only 2 animals to the swirling waters. Hannah rode across with the chuck wagon and Martha, the older woman clutching the seat with white-knuckled hands and muttering prayers until they reached the far bank. Despite the success, the delay had cost them precious time. The drive was now at least 2 days behind schedule. That evening, as they made camp, Hannah noticed Patrick deep in conversation with Tom and 2 other hands. Their expressions were serious, and they kept glancing toward the trail behind them. "Problem?" she asked, approaching the group. The men exchanged looks before Patrick answered. "Maybe." "Tom spotted riders following us again. More than before. Blackburn's men, likely. But there's something else." Patrick hesitated, then continued. "Word from a passing rider is that Blackburn's been telling people in Taylor that you abandoned the ranch. Left it undefended while you're on this drive." Hannah felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "He's planning something." "That would be my guess. With most of your hands here with the drive, there's only old Jeb and the cook left at the ranch." Hannah's mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Blackburn might be planning to damage the ranch, rustle the remaining cattle, or even stake false claims to portions of the property while she was away. I need to go back, she decided suddenly. Patrick shook his head. That's exactly what he wants, to split our already thin numbers. I can't let him destroy everything my father built, Hannah insisted. And you can't abandon this drive, Patrick countered. These cattle reaching market is the only thing that will keep the Crescent P solvent. You know that. The truth of his words stung. If the drive failed, the ranch would be finished regardless of what Blackburn did. Then what do you suggest? She demanded. Patrick's expression was resolute. I'll take 2 men and ride back. We can make it in 3 days if we push hard. You continue with the herd. No. Hannah's refusal was immediate. I need you here. You're the only trail boss I have. Tom can lead the drive, Patrick argued. He's done it before. And if Blackburn's men attack you on the way, 3 against how many? Patrick's jaw tightened. I can handle myself. I won't risk it, Hannah said firmly. Not for buildings and land. The Crescent P is more than property, it's the people who work it. My father understood that, and so do I. Their eyes locked in silent battle, neither willing to yield. The tension between them had grown over the weeks of the drive, a tension born not just of the dangers they faced, but of the increasing awareness of each other as more than employer and employee. Finally, Patrick spoke, his voice low. Hannah, if Blackburn destroys your ranch while you're gone, it was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it momentarily silenced her objections. Then we'll rebuild, she said softly. Together. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Patrick eventually nodded, though his expression remained troubled. We'll send a message back with the next rider we meet. Warn Jeb to be on guard. That's all we can do, Hannah agreed. As she walked away, Hannah felt Patrick's eyes following her. The drive had changed things between them in ways she hadn't anticipated. She'd hired him for his skills and experience, never expecting to find a true partner, someone who understood both her determination to succeed and her deep connection to the land her father had entrusted to her. Whether that partnership might evolve into something more was a question she wasn't yet ready to confront. For now, saving the Crescent P had to remain her only priority. The drive continued northward, the days blending together in a rhythm of dust, cattle, and endless sky. The attempted sabotage had united the crew in a common purpose. Even those who had initially resented taking orders from a woman now rode with determination, aware that the success of the drive meant not just their wages, but the survival of the Crescent P against Blackburn's schemes. 10 days after crossing the Colorado, they approached the Red River, the border between Texas and Indian Territory. The crossing would be dangerous, but beyond it lay open grazing land that would make the remaining journey to Abilene considerably easier. The night before the crossing, Hannah found Patrick standing alone on a small rise overlooking the bedded-down herd. The full moon silvered the landscape, casting long shadows across the Texas plain. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. Patrick glanced at her, then back at the peaceful scene below. "Just thinking. About tomorrow's crossing, about a lot of things." He paused, then added, "We've made good time since the Colorado. Might even reach Abilene earlier than planned if our luck holds." Hannah nodded. "The men have worked hard. For you," Patrick said quietly, "not just for wages anymore. They respect what you're doing." The simple acknowledgement meant more than elaborate praise would have. Hannah had earned that respect through weeks of grueling work, making decisions that proved her knowledge of both cattle and the business of ranching. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly. After we reach Abilene, Patrick seemed surprised by the question. Hadn't thought that far ahead. You could stay, Hannah said, the words coming before she'd fully considered them. The Crescent P needs a foreman, someone the men respect who knows the business. The position is yours if you want it. Patrick was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice held an emotion Hannah couldn't quite identify. Why me? You've proven you can run that ranch. You don't need anyone's help. It's not about needing help, Hannah replied carefully. It's about building something stronger than I could alone. My father always said a ranch is only as good as the people who work it. She met his gaze directly. And you're the best I've seen. The moonlight revealed a complexity of emotions crossing Patrick's face. Hannah, there are things about my past you don't know. I know enough, she said simply. I know you're a man of honor. I know you work harder than anyone. And I know the Crescent P is better with you than without you. Before Patrick could respond, shouts erupted from the camp below. Both turned to see men running, pointing toward the herd where cattle were beginning to rise, disturbed by something unseen in the darkness. Not again, Patrick muttered, already moving toward his horse. Hannah followed, mounting quickly as the commotion spread. Unlike the previous stampede, however, this disturbance seemed to be coming from the north ahead of them, rather than behind. As they rode toward the herd, the source of the disruption became clear. A group of riders, at least 8 or 10, were deliberately driving a smaller herd of cattle directly into the Crescent P herd. Rustlers! Tom shouted as he galloped past. Patrick shook his head. Not rustlers. They're mixing their cattle with ours. Makes them harder to separate. Hannah understood immediately. Blackburn. Those are his cattle. The strategy was clever and devastating. By mixing their herds, Blackburn's men were creating confusion that would take days to resolve. Any unmarked calves or animals with blurred brands would be impossible to claim definitively. And the delay would cost the Crescent P precious time and money. Head them off, Hannah shouted, spurring her horse toward the leading edge of the incoming cattle. The night erupted into chaos. Hannah's crew fought to contain their herd while simultaneously trying to block the intruding cattle. Shots were fired, though it was unclear who fired first. In the confusion and darkness, Hannah lost sight of Patrick. She focused on turning back a group of steers that were about to merge with her herd, her horse responding to the slightest pressure as they cut and weaved. A movement to her right caught her attention, one of Blackburn's men riding directly toward her, his face hidden beneath a bandana. Before she could react, the rider veered sharply, reaching out to grab her reins. Hannah's horse reared in surprise, nearly unseating her. As she struggled to maintain control, the masked man produced a knife, slashing toward her. Hannah jerked backward, feeling the blade slice through the sleeve of her coat. She kicked out, connecting solidly with the man's shoulder. He grunted in pain but didn't release his grip on her reins. Blackburn sends his regards, he snarled, raising the knife for another strike. The crack of a pistol split the night. The masked rider jerked, releasing Hannah's reins and clutching his arm. A second shot sent him tumbling from his saddle. Patrick appeared beside her, his gun still smoking. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice tight with concern. "No," Hannah managed, her heart hammering. "Just a tear in my coat." Patrick's expression was thunderous as he scanned the chaos around them. "This ends now." He fired twice more into the air, the shots echoing across the plain. "That's enough," he shouted. "Next shot won't be a warning." Remarkably, the fighting began to subside. Blackburn's men, realizing they'd lost the element of surprise, began to withdraw, driving their cattle back northward. Hannah's crew regrouped, several sporting minor injuries but none seriously hurt. When the dust settled, Hannah assessed the damage. They'd managed to keep most of Blackburn's cattle separate, though some had inevitably mixed with the Crescent P herd. More concerning was the man Patrick had shot, who lay groaning on the ground, clutching a bleeding arm. Hannah dismounted and approached cautiously, Patrick at her side. "Remove his mask," she ordered. One of her hands pulled down the bandana, revealing a face Hannah recognized one of Blackburn's newer hands, a young man barely out of his teens. "You tried to kill me," Hannah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The wounded man glared up at her. "Just following orders. Blackburn wants you gone one way or another." Patrick stepped forward, his expression cold. "Those orders just earned you a date with the law. Attempted murder carries a hefty sentence in these parts." Fear flickered across the young rustler's face. "Blackburn will deny everything. It'll be your word against his." "Maybe," Hannah agreed. "But a trial will expose his tactics for everyone to see. How many ranchers do you think will stand with him once they know he's willing to kill a woman to get her land?" The implications of this seemed to dawn on the young man, whose bravado quickly faded. Patrick ordered 2 hands to bind his wound and keep him under guard until they could turn him over to proper authorities. As the camp settled back into an uneasy quiet, Hannah found herself trembling not from fear, but from the delayed reaction to the violence. Patrick noticed immediately, guiding her away from the others to a quiet spot near the chuck wagon. "Drink this," he said, handing her a cup of coffee laced with something stronger. Hannah accepted gratefully, the liquid burning a path to her stomach and steadying her nerves. "He meant to kill me," she said quietly. Patrick's jaw tightened. "Blackburn's gone too far. This isn't just about the ranch anymore." "It never was," Hannah replied. "Not really. He couldn't stand that I refused to sell, that I dared to believe I could run the Crescent P as well as any man." "Better than most," Patrick corrected, "and that's what truly terrifies him." Hannah looked up, surprised by the fierce pride in his voice. "You've proven yourself every day of this drive," Patrick continued, his eyes holding hers. "Not just to the men, but to yourself. Your father would be proud." The words unleashed emotions Hannah had been holding at bay for weeks. Grief for her father, fear for the ranch's future, and the constant strain of proving herself worthy of the legacy she'd inherited. Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought to contain them. Without hesitation, Patrick moved closer, his arm encircling her shoulders. "It's all right," he said softly. "You don't have to be strong every moment." Something broke inside Hannah then, and she allowed herself to lean against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. They stood that way for several minutes, neither speaking, as the night settled around them and the herd quieted once more. When Hannah finally straightened, wiping away the last of her tears, she felt both embarrassed by her momentary weakness and strangely strengthened by it. Patrick had seen her vulnerability and offered support without judgment, a gift more precious than she could express. "Thank you," she said simply. Patrick nodded, his eyes reflecting something deeper than mere concern. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will come early enough." As Hannah turned to leave, she paused. "You never answered my question about staying on as foreman after Abilene." Patrick's expression grew complicated. "I'm not sure I'm the right man for that job." "I am," Hannah said with quiet certainty. "But the offer remains open. Think about it." With that, she walked back to her tent, aware that something fundamental had shifted between them, a boundary crossed that could never be re-established. Whether that would lead to Patrick's permanent place at the Crescent P or to an inevitable parting of ways remained to be seen. The Red River crossing the next day was tense but successful. Hannah pushed the crew and the herd hard, determined to make up time lost to Blackburn's interference. Their prisoner, subdued by pain and the prospect of facing justice, offered no resistance. 4 days later, they crossed into Kansas, the flat prairie stretching endlessly before them. Abilene was less than a week away, and despite everything, the drive was poised to succeed. The cattle were in good condition, losses had been minimal, and the crew worked with a cohesion that spoke to their shared purpose. Hannah should have felt triumphant, yet a nagging worry persisted. Patrick had been distant since the night of the attack, performing his duties with his usual efficiency, but avoiding the more personal conversations they'd begun to share. His answer about becoming foreman had been noncommittal at best, suggesting he might not remain at the Crescent P once the drive was complete. The thought troubled Hannah more than she wanted to admit, even to herself. Patrick had become more than an employee, more than a trusted advisor. His presence at the ranch, his steadfast support during the drive, had come to represent stability and possibility in a way no one else had since her father's death. As they made camp near a small creek 3 days from Abilene, Hannah resolved to speak with him directly. The future of the Crescent P might depend on it. She found him by the creek, filling water barrels for the next day's journey. The evening sun cast long shadows across the rippling water, burnishing Patrick's profile in golden light. "Mr. Forrester," she began, then corrected herself. "Patrick." He straightened, acknowledging her with a nod. "Miss Prescott." "Hannah," she insisted. "After everything we've been through, I think we're past formalities." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Hannah, then." She took a deep breath. "I need to know your plans after we reach Abilene." Patrick turned back to the creek, seemingly focused on the water barrel. "Like I said, I haven't given it much thought." "I think you have," Hannah countered. "And I think something's holding you back from accepting the foreman position." For a long moment, Patrick was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. "There are things about my past, complications that make staying in one place difficult." "What complications?" Hannah pressed. "If it's about money, we can negotiate. It's not about money." Patrick turned to face her, his expression pained. "It's about who I was before I came to the Crescent P." Hannah waited, sensing he was struggling with whether to continue. "My name is Patrick Forrester," he said finally. "But for 3 years, I was known as Pat Foster, riding with Jesse James and his gang." The admission hit Hannah like a physical blow. The James gang had terrorized banks and trains across Missouri and neighboring states. Their robberies were legendary, as was their violence. "You're an outlaw," she said, her voice barely audible. "I was," Patrick corrected. "I left that life behind 2 years ago, rode south, changed my name, started over. Been working honest jobs ever since." He met her gaze directly. "I've never lied to you about my skills or experience, just omitted certain chapters." Hannah's mind raced, connecting fragments that suddenly made sense: his expertise with firearms, his wariness around law enforcement, his comment about recognizing unfair odds. "Does anyone else know?" she asked. Patrick shook his head. "No one in Texas as far as I know. But there are still rewards posted for information on James' gang members, if word got out." He didn't need to finish the thought. Hannah processed this revelation, measuring it against everything she knew of the man standing before her. The Patrick Forrester she'd come to know was honorable, hardworking, and unfailingly loyal to the Crescent P and to her. Could she reconcile that with the outlaw past he'd just confessed? "Why tell me this now?" she asked finally. "Because you deserve the truth before offering me a permanent position," Patrick replied. "And because—" He hesitated, then continued more softly, "because what's between us has become more than employer and employee. I couldn't let that grow based on a lie." The acknowledgement of their changing relationship hung in the air between them, neither denying nor fully embracing it. "Have you killed people?" Hannah asked bluntly. Patrick's expression tightened. Yes. In gunfights during robberies. Never in cold blood, but yes. Hannah absorbed this, her emotions in turmoil. And now, are you still running? I'm trying to build something different, Patrick said, a quiet intensity in his voice. To be someone different. The past 2 years working honest jobs have been about proving to myself that I could change. And then I found the Crescent P, found you. His gaze held hers. For the first time, I've wanted to stay somewhere, be part of something that matters. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. Hannah found herself at a crossroads: trust the man she'd come to know or judge him for the mistakes of his past. Before she could respond, shouts erupted from the camp. Both turned to see a rider approaching at a gallop, one of the hands they'd sent ahead to scout the trail to Abilene. Miss Prescott, the rider called, reining in his lathered horse. Urgent news from Taylor. Hannah's heart sank. The ranch, the rider nodded grimly. Got word in Council Grove. Blackburn's men tried to burn out the ranch house 3 days after we left. Jeb and the cook held them off, but Blackburn's claiming the land is abandoned. He's filed papers saying you've forfeited ownership by leaving it unattended. Patrick's expression darkened. That's no legal claim. Hannah's on a legitimate cattle drive. Maybe not, the rider agreed, but he's got the county judge listening. Word is, if you don't return to contest the claim within 30 days of filing, the judge might rule in Blackburn's favor. Hannah calculated quickly. When did he file? 2 weeks ago, according to what I heard. That gives us 2 weeks to get back, Hannah said, her mind racing. We need to reach Abilene, sell the herd, and ride hard for Taylor. Patrick nodded. We can make it. Abilene's 3 days away at most. Sell the herd, send most of the men back with the wagons, and a small group can ride ahead faster. The revelation of Patrick's outlaw past was temporarily set aside as they focused on this new threat. Hannah organized the camp, explaining the situation and laying out the accelerated timeline. The crew, united in their determination to save the Crescent P, agreed without complaint. As preparations continued, Hannah pulled Patrick aside. This conversation isn't finished, she said quietly. But right now, I need the man who's been my right hand these past weeks. Patrick's relief was visible. You've got him. We'll save your ranch, Hannah, I promise you that. For the moment, it was enough. The complications of Patrick's past and their evolving feelings would have to wait. The Crescent P came first. The next 3 days were a blur of dust and determination as they pushed the herd toward Abilene. When the town finally appeared on the horizon, a bustling cattle terminus transformed from a sleepy village by the railroad's arrival, Hannah felt a surge of both relief and anxiety. The cattle were sold in record time, commanding a good price that would ensure the Crescent P's financial security for at least a year. Hannah handled the negotiations herself, earning surprised respect from the buyers who hadn't expected to deal with a woman. Patrick organized their return journey. Most of the crew would follow at a normal pace with the chuck wagon and supplies. Hannah, Patrick, Tom, and 2 other experienced riders would push ahead, traveling light and fast to reach Taylor before Blackburn's claim could be upheld. As they prepared to depart, Hannah paid the men their wages, adding a bonus for their loyalty during the challenging drive. Their faces reflected a new respect that went beyond mere acceptance of her authority. They had seen her courage, her determination, and her skill, qualities that had earned their genuine admiration. We'll be right behind you, Miss Prescott, one of the older hands assured her. And when we get back, Blackburn better watch his step. The Crescent P takes care of its own. The sentiment warmed Hannah, reinforcing her belief that the ranch was more than land and cattle. It was a community of people who had come to see themselves as part of something larger. As they mounted up for the hard ride south, Patrick moved his horse alongside Hannah's. "Ready?" he asked simply. Hannah nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Let's go home." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning neither had fully addressed. For Hannah, the Crescent P was undeniably home, the land her father had loved, the legacy he had entrusted to her. For Patrick, home had been an elusive concept, something he had avoided claiming for reasons that were now clear. Whether the Crescent P could become his home as well remained uncertain. But as they rode south together, leading the small party on their urgent mission, Hannah found herself hoping it might be possible that the ranch could offer Patrick the new beginning he sought, just as it had offered her the chance to prove herself when all odds seemed stacked against her. The journey back to Taylor was grueling. They rode from dawn until dusk each day, stopping only when absolutely necessary to rest the horses. Hannah pushed herself as hard as any of the men, her determination to save her ranch overshadowing all physical discomfort. On the 8th day of their journey, as they crossed back into Texas, Patrick pulled his horse alongside Hannah's during a brief rest. "We should reach Taylor by tomorrow evening if we maintain this pace," he said, offering her a canteen. Hannah drank gratefully, then passed it back. "Not a moment too soon. Blackburn's deadline is in 4 days. Patrick studied her face, noting the fatigue she was trying to mask. "You've done the impossible, you know. Driven a herd to Abilene and back in record time, all while facing down sabotage and attacks. Most men couldn't have done it." "I had help," Hannah replied, meeting his gaze. "Good help." Patrick looked away, the reminder of their unfinished conversation hanging between them. Since his revelation about his past, they had focused exclusively on the urgent journey home, neither having the time or energy to address the implications of his confession. "About what I told you," Patrick began hesitantly. Hannah shook her head. "Not now. Not until we've secured the ranch. Then we'll talk about everything, your past, your future. Our future, if there is one." The possibility inherent in those words hung between them as they remounted and continued their journey south. They reached Taylor just as dusk was falling the next day, their horses lathered and exhausted from the punishing pace. As they rode toward the Crescent P, Hannah's heart clenched at the sight of smoke rising from the direction of the ranch house. "No," she whispered, spurring her tired horse to a faster pace. Patrick and the others followed, their hands moving instinctively to their weapons. As they crested the final hill overlooking the ranch, the source of the smoke became clear, a controlled fire in the yard where Jeb was burning brush and debris. Relief flooded Hannah as she took in the scene. The ranch house stood intact, though signs of the attempted arson were visible in the scorched timbers near the porch. Jeb looked up at their approach, his weathered face breaking into a wide grin. "Miss Hannah," he called, hurrying toward them as they dismounted. "Praise the Lord. We weren't sure you'd make it back in time." Hannah embraced the old ranch hand who had worked for her father for over 20 years. "What happened, Jeb? We heard Blackburn tried to burn the place." Jeb's expression darkened. "3 nights after you left with the herd. 8 of his men rode in, thinking there was just me and the cook. Started with the barn, planning to flush us out of the house, I reckon." A hint of pride entered his voice. "But we were ready for him, had the Winchester and my old shotgun. Put up enough of a fight that they backed off after setting just part of the porch alight." "And Blackburn's claim that the ranch is abandoned?" Patrick asked. "Filed papers with Judge Wilson 2 weeks back," Jeb confirmed. "Been strutting around town saying the Crescent P will be his by month's end. Even brought some of his men out to start measuring for new fence lines." His smile returned. "Gonna be mighty surprised to see you home, Miss Hannah." Hannah squeezed the old man's shoulder. "You did well, Jeb." "I won't forget it," "Just doing what your pa would have expected," Jeb replied simply. After ensuring the horses were tended to, Hannah wasted no time. Though exhausted from the journey, she changed into her most respectable dress and ordered the buggy prepared. Patrick, understanding her intent without being told, readied himself to accompany her. "You need rest," he protested mildly as she emerged from the house. "I'll rest when the ranch is secure," Hannah replied, determination in every line of her bearing. "Judge Wilson needs to see that I'm very much present on my property." Judge Elias Wilson was enjoying a quiet dinner at his home when Hannah and Patrick arrived unannounced. His surprise at seeing Hannah was evident, though he quickly recovered his composure and invited them into his study. "Miss Prescott," he began formally, "I understand you've been absent from your property for some weeks." "On a cattle drive to Abilene," Hannah replied directly, "a standard business practice for any ranch owner. As you well know, Judge Wilson." The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Blackburn has filed a formal complaint stating that the property has been abandoned, that you've left the state permanently." "Mr. Blackburn attempted to burn my ranch house while I was conducting legitimate business," Hannah interrupted, her voice cool and controlled. "He then filed false claims knowing I was temporarily away. I have returned well within the 30-day period specified by law, with witnesses who can attest to the purpose of my absence." Judge Wilson looked uncomfortable. "These are serious accusations against a respected member of the community." "They are factual statements," Hannah countered. "And I'm prepared to provide sworn testimony from my ranch hands regarding the arson attempt. I believe attempted destruction of property is a serious crime, Judge, even when perpetrated by a respected member of the community." Patrick stepped forward. "Judge Wilson, Miss Prescott has just completed a successful cattle drive to Abilene, bringing significant commerce and credit to this county. She has managed her ranch responsibly and legally since her father's death. Mr. Blackburn's claims are not only false but malicious." The judge studied Patrick, taking in his steady gaze and confident bearing. "And you are Patrick Forrester, Miss Prescott's foreman." The statement, made without hesitation, sent a ripple of surprise through Hannah. Despite their unresolved conversation, Patrick had just publicly aligned himself with her and the Crescent P in a way that suggested permanence. Judge Wilson sighed, clearly recognizing that Blackburn's scheme had failed. "I'll dismiss the abandonment claim first thing in the morning, Miss Prescott. As for the accusations of arson, if you wish to file formal charges, you'll need to present your evidence to the sheriff." "I intend to," Hannah assured him. "Mr. Blackburn has acted with impunity for too long. That ends now." As they left the judge's home, Hannah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The immediate threat to the ranch had been averted, though she harbored no illusions that Blackburn would simply accept defeat. "Did you mean it?" she asked quietly as Patrick helped her into the buggy. "About being my foreman." Patrick paused, his hand still on her arm. In the moonlight, his expression was both serious and vulnerable. "If you'll have me," he replied, "despite everything I told you." Hannah held his gaze. "We still need to talk about your past, what it means for your future." "For our future?" Patrick nodded, a cautious hope in his eyes. "Tonight, after you've rested." "Tonight," Hannah agreed. The ranch house welcomed them back with warm lamplight, Martha having prepared a simple but hearty meal in celebration of their return. After eating, Hannah retired briefly to refresh herself, changing into a comfortable house dress rather than the formal attire she'd worn to the judge's home. She found Patrick waiting on the porch, staring out at the darkened landscape of the Crescent P. He'd shed his trail dust and changed into clean clothes, his hair still damp from washing. "It's a beautiful place," he said as she joined him. I can see why you fought so hard to keep it." "It's more than just land," Hannah replied, settling beside him on the porch swing her father had built years ago. "It's everything my father worked for, everything he believed in. He used to say that a person's worth isn't measured by what they own, but by what they build and who they share it with." Patrick nodded slowly. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." Hannah turned slightly to face him. "He also believed in second chances. That people could change, become more than their past mistakes." Patrick's expression tightened. "My mistakes were crimes, Hannah, serious ones. I know." Hannah's voice was gentle but direct, "And I'm not dismissing that. But the man I've come to know over these past months, the man who stood beside me when others walked away, who risked his life for this ranch, and for me that man deserves a chance to be judged on who he is now, not who he was." Hope warred with caution in Patrick's eyes. "The law might not see it that way. If my true identity ever came to light, then we would face it," Hannah interrupted. "Together." The word hung between them, laden with meaning beyond its simple pronunciation. "I'm offering you a place here, Patrick," Hannah continued carefully. "As foreman of the Crescent P, not out of gratitude or necessity, but because you've earned it, because this ranch needs you." She paused, gathering her courage. "Because I need you." Patrick's breath caught audibly. "Hannah, I'm not asking for promises you can't make," she hurried on. "I know there are risks. I know your past might someday catch up with you. But I also know that what we've built these past months, the trust, the partnership, is worth fighting for." Patrick reached for her hand, his touch gentle yet somehow grounding. "When I rode onto this ranch, I was just looking for work, a place to be useful, to earn honest wages. I never expected—" He faltered, then continued more softly, "I never expected to find a home, or someone who would see past what I was to what I could be." Hannah turned her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Is that what the Crescent P has become? A home, not the ranch," Patrick clarified, his voice deepening. "You, Hannah, wherever you are, that's home." The admission, so simple yet so profound, broke the last barrier between them. Hannah leaned forward as Patrick did the same, their lips meeting in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. His hand rose to cradle her face, while hers rested against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. When they finally parted, Hannah found herself smiling, truly smiling, for the first time since her father's death. "So you'll stay, be my foreman?" Patrick's answering smile held a warmth that transformed his usually reserved features. "I'll stay, but I'm hoping in time to be more than just your foreman." The implication was clear, bringing a blush to Hannah's cheeks even as certainty filled her heart. "I'm hoping that too." As they sat together on the porch of the ranch house her father had built, watching the stars emerge over the Texas landscape, Hannah felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The Crescent P had weathered its first major crisis under her leadership. There would be others Blackburn wouldn't give up easily, and Patrick's past remained a potential threat, but they would face those challenges together. She had proven what her father had always believed, that a Prescott could run the Crescent P, regardless of gender. And in Patrick Forrester, she had found not just a skilled foreman but a partner who understood both her strength and her vulnerability, who respected her authority while offering his own considerable abilities in service to their shared future. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. The prejudices they'd faced wouldn't disappear overnight. But with the successful drive behind them and the ranch secure, Hannah felt confident they could build something lasting on the foundation her father had established. Together, they would make the Crescent P not just survive, but thrive. 3 days later, the rest of the cattle drive crew returned to find the ranch functioning smoothly under its unusual leadership. Hannah and Patrick had already begun planning improvements: new breeding stock, expanded grazing areas, additional water sources for the drier seasons. The men, having witnessed Hannah's competence on the drive, integrated back into ranch operations with minimal resistance. Blackburn, faced with the dismissal of his abandonment claim and the formal charges of arson Hannah had filed with the sheriff, retreated temporarily. Though Hannah harbored no illusions that he had given up his designs on the Crescent P, his immediate threat had been neutralized. As summer gave way to fall, the ranch settled into a productive rhythm. Patrick's role as foreman was accepted without question by the hands, many of whom had seen firsthand his skills and leadership during the drive. His relationship with Hannah evolved naturally, their professional partnership deepening into something more personal, though both maintained appropriate boundaries while working. By Christmas, their engagement was announced to the community, raising eyebrows among some of Taylor's more traditional citizens, but generating genuine congratulations from those who had come to respect Hannah's determination and success. They were married the following spring, a simple ceremony on the ranch with Martha beaming through tears and the ranch hands uncomfortably resplendent in their Sunday best. Judge Wilson himself performed the ceremony, his earlier doubts about Hannah's capabilities long since dispelled. The union of Hannah Prescott and Patrick Forrester brought more than personal happiness. It solidified the Crescent P-TK's position as one of the most successful operations in the county. Patrick's expertise in cattle breeding and range management complemented Hannah's head for business and unwavering vision for the ranch's future. James Blackburn remained a persistent adversary, attempting various schemes to undermine their success. But with each challenge, the Crescent P emerged stronger, its reputation growing as a fair employer and well-managed operation. Patrick's past remained a shadow on their horizon, a secret known only to them. They established contingency plans, legal protections ensuring Hannah's ownership of the ranch would be secure even if Patrick's true identity were ever discovered. But as years passed with no sign that his former life had followed him to Texas, the shadow gradually receded. 2 years after their marriage, Hannah gave birth to their first child, a son they named Samuel, after her father. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 18 months later. Patrick proved to be as dedicated a father as he was a husband and rancher, teaching their children to ride almost as soon as they could walk, instilling in them the same values of hard work and integrity that had guided his own redemption. By 1890, 12 years after Hannah had stood on the porch reading the telegram announcing her father's death, the Crescent P had grown to over 8,000 acres. Their herd numbered nearly 1,000 head, with bloodlines sought after by ranchers across Texas. The original ranch house had been expanded, though Hannah insisted on preserving the porch swing where she and Patrick had first acknowledged their feelings. On the anniversary of her father's death each year, Hannah would visit his grave on the hillside overlooking the ranch. Sometimes she went alone, sometimes accompanied by Patrick and their children. This particular year, as she placed wildflowers against the weathered headstone, she felt Patrick's presence behind her. "He would be proud," Patrick said quietly, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Of everything you've built." Hannah covered his hand with her own. "Everything we've built," she corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you." Patrick shook his head. "You would have found a way. That's who you are, Hannah, the woman who refused to be defeated, who proved everyone wrong." His voice softened. "The woman who gave me a second chance when I'd stopped believing I deserved one." Hannah turned to face him, seeing in his features the same strength and integrity that had first drawn her to him, now softened by years of shared happiness. Silver threaded his dark hair at the temples, and lines had formed at the corners of his eyes, evidence of years spent squinting into the Texas sun and, more often, smiling at their growing children. "We gave each other what we needed," she replied, reaching up to touch his cheek. "You gave me the support to succeed when everyone expected me to fail. I gave you a place to belong when you'd been running for too long." Patrick drew her close, his arms as secure and comforting as they had been since that first embrace on the porch 12 years earlier. "Best decision I ever made, riding onto the Crescent P that day. Best decision I ever made, hiring you," Hannah countered with a smile. As they walked back toward the ranch house where their children waited, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the frightened yet determined young woman reading a telegram announcing her father's death to the confident ranch owner and mother she had become. From the solitary ex-outlaw seeking redemption to the respected rancher and devoted family man Patrick had grown into. The Crescent P had given them both a second chance, Hannah to prove herself in a world that underestimated her, Patrick to build an honest life after years in the shadows. Together, they had transformed those chances into a legacy that would endure beyond their lifetimes. As they approached the ranch house, their children ran to meet them, Samuel as tall and straight as his grandfather had been, Elizabeth with her mother's determined spirit and her father's gentle heart. Behind them, the Crescent P stretched toward the horizon, the land Hannah had fought for, the home Patrick had found, the legacy they had built together. In that moment, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that everything, the struggles, the dangers, the doubts, had been worth it. She had run the ranch after her father died. Every man had challenged her until the cowboy became her foreman, and in doing so, they had both found exactly where they belonged,